Hi there, my name is Yasmin and I am a tutor here at Tutor Impact. And today we are going to be looking at our solar system. Now, don't worry, this class will not require any prior knowledge, and it's going to be a very beginner level video about what our solar system is and the things within it. So we're going to start off by thinking, what is our solar system? So our solar system, which you can see in the picture here, is the collection of 8 planets and their moons, which all orbit around the sun, together with smaller bodies in the form of asteroids, meteoroids, and comets. Now, don't worry about those last 3. All we need to know is that there are other sorts of matter that orbit the sun with the planets. Now, you might think, what is a planet? Well, we have 8 of these in our solar system, and you can see them all in a line here. Now, this big orange thing at the side, that is not a planet. That is the sun, which is actually a star. So the sun is not a planet, but these other 8 shapes here, these are the 8 planets in our solar system. So Earth, the one we live on, is one of those 8 planets that travels around the sun. And then we have the other planets, which are Mercury, which is the first one on the left, the small one closest to the sun. We then have Venus, which is the second one. We have our own planet, which is Earth. We have Mars, which is on the other side of Earth, slightly further away. And then the final 4 are Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So all of those planets are in our solar system. And this diagram shows the order they are in line with the sun. So Mercury is the closest to the sun, and Neptune is the furthest away from the sun. Now, you might be thinking, how do I remember the order of the planets? So how do I remember the order that they come in? So I personally use the phrase, my very easy method just simply uses numbers. So I use this phrase personally to help me remember the order of the planets, because there's 8 of them, so it's quite hard to remember. And the way I do this is I use the first letter of each word. So, for example, it begins with the letter M, and so does the word Mercury. So my makes me think of Mercury. The second word in my phrase is V, and that matches up with the V in Venus. And then we have Earth, which matches with easy. We have method, which matches with Mars. We have Jupiter, which matches with Jupiter. We have simply for Saturn, uses for Uranus, and N for Neptune, and that's numbers. So my very easy method just simply uses numbers. So it's quite an easy phrase to remember, and it helps you think of the first letter that matches with each of the planets. Now, the solar system, as I said, is comprised of these planets, and they also have asteroids, moons, and dwarf planets. Now, you might have heard of the dwarf planet Pluto, which originally was considered one of the planets of our solar system. So originally we had another planet called Pluto, which was just further than Neptune. However, since then, it has been recategorized as a dwarf planet. So now we only consider our solar system to have these 8 planets. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And I'm now going to go into a bit of detail and tell you some facts about each one. Don't worry about remembering all of this. This session is more to just tell you some interesting facts rather than you to remember all of this. So we're going to start in the order of the planets. So using the statement, my Mercury, we're going to start with Mercury. So Mercury is actually the smallest planet, and it is closest to the sun. So it's the closest and the smallest planet out of the 8 planets in our solar system. So as you can see here, the diameter of Mercury is 4,887 kilometers. So that is the distance that it takes for you to walk around. So the diameter, so if you think of a circle, I'll draw a circle here to help you describe this. So diameter is, oh, it's not going to work, but so if you can see, the diameter is the distance between the curves on the planet. So, so from here to here is the diameter of Mercury, and that is 4,878 kilometers. Now it takes 58.65 Earth days for a rotation of Mercury. So in the time that Earth takes, which is 1 day, it takes Mercury 58 times that length to do 1 rotation. So Earth takes 1 day and Mercury takes 58 days. So it turns a lot slower than we do on Earth. However, the orbit time, so the time that it takes Mercury to go around the sun, is a quarter of the time it takes in Earth years, so 0.24 Earth years. What this means is that if you lived on Mercury, you would have 4 times the amount of Christmases. So it might be nice to live on Mercury. Unlike Earth, Mercury has no moons. So moons orbit the planet. So we have our own moon, but Mercury does not have any moons. And it can get up to 400 degrees Celsius on Mercury. So it's really, really hot because it's so close to the sun. So that's a bit about Mercury. We're now going to look at similar facts for each of the planets. So the next planet, so so we have Venus. So Venus is bigger than Mercury, as you can see. The diameter is 12,102 kilometers. So Mercury was 4,878 and Venus is about 3 times the size of Mercury, so a lot bigger. It's also further away from the sun than Mercury, so it's 108 million kilometers from the sun, and it takes 243 Earth days for a rotation, so it's even slower at rotating than Mercury. So each day on Venus is the equivalent of 243 days on Earth. So their days are much, much, much longer because it takes so long for the planet to turn. But similarly to Mercury, Venus orbits the sun. So if the sun is here, it orbits the sun much quicker than Earth. So the length of the year is 0.62 Earth years. So around 7 months on Earth is the time it takes for Venus to have a year, to have it fully orbit the sun. And similarly to Mercury as well, it gets very hot on Venus and it can get up to 500 degrees Celsius. So very, very hot. We wouldn't be able to live in that temperature. It would be too hot. So the next planet, very easy. So we have Earth. Obviously, that is our own planet. So you probably know quite a lot about it already. It's a similar size to Venus. If you look, the diameter is similarly 12,000. We've got a few more 100 kilometers on Venus, but it's a similar size. And again, it's a bit farther away from the sun, 150 million kilometers. And obviously the length of the year is 1 Earth year. because it takes us 365 days. So that is obviously the unit we're using to compare for the other ones. We have one moon, which we call the moon, and obviously one rotation for the Earth to rotate is 1 day. So yeah, you probably know a lot about Earth already, so I'm going to move on to Mars. So my very easy method, so the M of method links with Mars. So the diameter compared to Earth, as you can see, it's about half the size of Earth. It's 6,787 kilometers in diameter. Again, we're moving further away from the sun. So this is 288 kilometers away, and it takes 1.03 Earth days for a rotation. So the days on Mars, are very similar to the ones on Earth, because it takes around the same 1 day time. So the rotation is similar to Earth, but the length of the year is much longer because it takes Mars longer to get around the sun. So it takes 1.88 Earth years for it to orbit the sun. So that's less Christmases, if you're interested in that comparison. And unlike Earth, it can get a bit hotter. So it goes up to around 55 degrees Celsius. So if you think about the Earth, our temperatures at their highest points usually reach in the 40s, potentially in the hottest countries, whereas Mars can go up to 55 degrees Celsius, which is obviously very hot. The next one, we are then moving on to Jupiter, but these last 4 planets, they're all much bigger than the first 4 we've looked at, and this is because they are known as the gas planets. So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are all gas planets. They're all farther from the sun, and they all have many moons, but what makes them so big is that they are giant balls of hydrogen and helium. So unlike the planets we've just discussed, these don't really have a fixed surface because they are comprised of hydrogen and helium. So that's the last 4 planets. So that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So we're now going to go and discuss them in turn. So as I said, we have Jupiter. So going back to our phrase that we remember, we have my very easy method just. So just matches up with Jupiter. So Jupiter is our largest planet in the whole solar system. So it's very, very big. And it is 139,822 kilometers in diameter. So it's much, much bigger than the planets we've looked at so far. And again, as we're moving further away from the sun, the distance between Jupiter and the sun is obviously greater than the planets we've looked at. So it's 778.5 million kilometers away from the sun. Because of this, the length of the year is much bigger because Jupiter has to travel further to get around the sun because it's further away. So the length of the year in Jupiter is 11.86 Earth years. So it would take Jupiter 11 Earth years, well, nearly 12 Earth years, just to go around the sun once. So for every 1 year we have on Earth, it takes Jupiter nearly 12 years to do that 1 equivalent year, which is 1 orbit around the sun. However, the rotation time for Jupiter is much quicker. It's 1.41 Earth days. So their day is much shorter than ours, under half. So it takes them much less time to spin around. The next planet then is Saturn, which again is another one of the gas giants. So we have my very easy method, just simply, so that matches with Saturn. The diameter again is also one of the very big planets. Not quite as big as Jupiter, but it's 120,536 kilometers in diameter. So again, it's very big. And it's also, again, much further from the sun. And it takes a similar time to Jupiter. It takes 0.44 Earth days to rotate. So again, the day on Saturn is about half a day in Earth. Again, the length of the year is a lot more than Earth because it's further away, and it takes 29 Earth years to get around the sun. So again, much longer than on Earth. And because we're obviously moving much further away from the sun, the planet itself is much colder because the planets get their heat from the sun. So temperatures can reach minus 178 degrees Celsius. So it's much, much, much colder than on Earth. After Saturn, we have Uranus, which is my very easy method, just simply uses. So it's the second to last one. Again, it's quite big, not as big as the two we just looked at, Jupiter and Saturn, but again, it's still got a diameter of 50,000 across the diameter. Again, like the others, it's farther away from the sun. We've just moved even further now. It's 2,877 million kilometers away. The length of the year is now 84. So we're going even longer for the time taken to orbit the sun. The rotation is still under that of an Earth day. It's 0.72. And again, the temperatures get even colder, getting further away from the sun, and they can reach minus 224 degrees Celsius. So very, very cold. And the last planet to discuss is Neptune. So that's the last one in our phrase that represents the word numbers. So Neptune, again, similar size to Uranus, 49,000. Again, even further away from the sun. And again, similarly to Uranus, it takes around 0.7 Earth days for our rotation. So the day in Neptune is still shorter than a day on Earth, but the length of the year is considerably longer. It takes 168 Earth years for Neptune to completely orbit the sun. So 168 years for 1 year equivalent. And as with the other gas giants, it's much farther away from the sun, so it's much colder, and temperatures can reach minus 218 degrees Celsius. So that is the last planet. We're now going to see if you can remember the order of the planets. So what I want you to do is to pause the video here and see if you can label each one of the planets. So if you pause the video here, and I will give you a couple of seconds to name as many of the planets as you can. Okay, so you've hopefully had a few minutes to think which planet is which. I obviously recommend you using my method by saying my very easy method just simply uses numbers. I'm going to give you the answers here. So my, Mercury, V for very is Venus, easy, Earth, method, Mars, just, Jupiter, simply, Saturn, uses, Uranus, and numbers is Neptune. So the order goes Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Mercury. So I hope this video has given you a good insight into just a bit about our planets, and I hope you now understand what our solar system is and what it comprises of. And that is our star, which is the sun, there are 8 planets, and all of the asteroids and meteoroids which sort of orbit around the sun. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day and that you found this interesting. Bye for now.